Greetings and salutations, ladies and gentlemen. Man, this gangbanging lifestyle, man, it is not a game. It is not a game, man. So take heed, man. I'm telling you right now. You might be listening to me today, but you might not be listening to me tomorrow. Because you might be free. Or, someone might just happen to roll up on you. Because that's just what's happening nowadays, man. People are getting dropped at an alarming rate. Especially in the summertime. You guys already know how it gets down over here in Cali in the summertime. People start dropping like flies. And, I seen this video the other day that was produced out of Santa Ana. Young kid got murdered. Very disturbing video. And I've seen lots of videos that what you want to call disturbing. Blah, 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 go, LimeWire, Faces of Death, all that. And I'll tell you what. This video right here I found completely way more disturbing. Not because it was graphic. And it wasn't graphic at all. It wasn't bloody or none of that. However, it was just because the way this individual resembled every other Cholo Chicano that's roaming around right here in the streets of Los Angeles, San Diego, San Bernardino, some parts up north. It's all the same style, man. That distinguishable style, that Cholo culture, those big pants. You know what I'm saying? That those pro club t-shirts with, of course, that gang identifier hat. It's the same look. Every Cholo has that same look. The socks to the knees. With the Nikes, with the Air Maxes, the Air Max 90s, or some Chucks, or some Converse, or some Cortezes. Man, it's all the same look, man. And unfortunately, this young man got smoked. But like I said, it made it more disturbing and gave me the chills just because he looked like every other gangster around here. A young man, a young individual, a young 18, 19-year-old with his whole life ahead of him. With him still being on the verge, he still could have perhaps went to school. His dad maybe could have got him a job at the local construction site. Like, this individual still could have made it. He was free. He still had the opportunity. So that's what I'm trying to convey to you. You still have that chance. You still have the opportunity to change. And no one's saying you have to testify. You gotta just no. Just make sure your priorities are straight, man. Make sure that you're going to be free and that you're going to be alive for the next 5, 10, 15 years. Make sure of that. Because when you get locked up, ain't no one going to give a shit. And I tell you what, that fine ass broad you got, more than likely your homie's probably going to end up typing that pretty soon. No one gives a shit when people get locked up. No one cares. You see, and I hate to use this message, but Savage, you seen what happened in Savage Studios and what's happening, man. It's dying out. People are starting to forget. A lot of people didn't care to begin with. People are not going to care now. A few videos have been made. Some people profited a few $100 off his name. Done deal. Done deal. Life moves on. The world moves on. What do you think is going to happen if, God forbid, anything happens to you? What do you think is going to happen if anything happens to me? No one's going to give a shit. So that's what I'm trying to tell you. No one's going to care if anything happens to you. You got to care, man. Stay out the way, man. Lay low, man. Man, don't pick up the phone. Don't go kick it with the homies. You don't got to do all that. All right, I've gone too much, but I hope some of you guys can understand what I'm trying to say, man. This gangbanging shit, man, it's not a joke, man. It's not a joke, man. Thank you.
I've explained and shared a lot of my experiences through, the streets, county jails, prison. I've shared a little bit. Obviously, I've lived quite a long life, so there's a lot that has happened in my life, and I try to share the experiences that will make an impact, and I try to also share the experiences to give people like an insight, like a clear vision of what was like really going down within my gang, P9, and like within the Aryan Brotherhood. I think that's like really like key, because the Aryan Brotherhood, they're the ones that run the California prison system and the federal prison system nationwide and throughout the state. So it's really important that to me to give people that real understanding of things. And I have a lot of people on my tablet that are from Cocoa County, and they're always asking me, a lot of viewers and a lot of people that are listening to stories are always asking me on a little bit more insight on certain individuals and, the structure of the Aryan Brotherhood, the oath, and things of that nature. I haven't shared a lot of that stuff yet, but, I will share this story because a lot of people are wondering whatever happened to Little Ronnie Irwin from the Aryan Brotherhood. Little Ron Irwin, a backstory on Ronnie, I very first heard his name in about 2010 when I was in High Desert State Prison when we were at Nor with the Northerners. Where I were with the Northerners, I had already shared that I ended up getting validated, and I landed back there in Z Unit in High Desert State Prison. And it's a really corrupt prison. There's a lot of crazy things that are going on there, even with the cops, law enforcement, and things of that nature. But the very first time I heard the name of Little Ronnie Irwin, and was through my homeboy Knuckles, from Peni. He had that prison. He legitimately had that prison, and he was in the hole, and he told me that all dealings and everything that was CDC is up under Ronnie. But see, at this time, there was a lot of misconceptions on people with the same names and people getting them confused on which one was what, because a lot of people always thought my homeboy Fat Pat was the same person who was Pat Brady from the Aryan Brotherhood, and a lot of people got confused. Same thing with this. I was always up under the impression that when I heard this name, Ronnie, that it was Big Ronnie Yondell.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
Big Ronnie Yondell is head of commission of the Aryan Brotherhood. He was the head of commission. He's Baron Mills' kid. Baron Mills is one of the founders of the Aryan Brotherhood, who's sitting in Florence, Colorado in ADX with no human interaction. Ronnie Yondell is his kid, and he came out to California and ended up getting the reins. He is number one in charge. So when I heard that all dealings were up under the big bro, Ronnie, I assumed that it was Big Ronnie Yondell at that time, but it wasn't. It was Little Ronnie. Now, when you're an active white inmate and they're identifying an Aryan Brotherhood member, you don't put an Aryan Brotherhood's member on a kite. You put the first letter of their name with a circle around it. So when I was being addressed about Ronnie having this, it was just the letter R with a circle around it. That letter R with a circle around it means that is a made man. A regular dude like such as myself would not be able to put that same label like that in a kite, or else I would be stabbed for that. There's repercussions for things even like that. So that was the very first time I heard about Little Ronnie, and so everything was up under Little Ronnie. Big Ronnie was the man behind the curtain. I ended up finding this out later on, and everybody wanted to know. He's from Cocoa County. And Little Ronnie, he became a member of the Aryan Brotherhood right around 2008, 2009-ish. They did a little draft, and he got made. He was one of the dudes that got made. He was a member. He was, in fact, a member. And it's really hard to become a member of the Aryan Brotherhood. It's even harder to earn your rock. When you earn your shamrock, that's even harder. That means you have to kill somebody for the Aryan Brotherhood in order to get that tattoo placed on your skin. And that's why the Aryan Brotherhood is really, really stern about another person outside of the Aryan Brotherhood rocking a clover tattoo. They will stab you. They will kill you if they have to. You better remove that clover. They don't care if you're Irish. Get that tattoo off you. So when I got validated, I ended up in, Tehachapi. Little Ronnie was in Corcoran. He was in Corcoran's shoe running things, and I never actually met him formally. I just heard about him, and I heard that he was doing his thing. And in Pelican Bay, I made my way up there to Pelican Bay, and I was on the Seaside Corridor. All the Aryan Brotherhood members are housed on the D-side corridor. They call it the short corridor. And I used to get visits up there in Pelican Bay, and that was your only communication or avenue on getting kites from the Seaside Corridor over to D Corridor. You would literally have to fish at visiting. In 2016 was when the settlement happened, when Todd Asker from the Aryan Brotherhood, he won the settlement. That settlement was forcing them to release all validated inmates, whether you're an associate or a member of a prison gang. Aryan Brotherhood, EGF, NF, Northern Structure, Nazi lowrider, whatever prison gang validation you have, that Astor settlement forced them to release us from the SHU in 2016. In 2016, I was one of the first ones released because my annual happened to line up with that exact time that they were releasing. So since it was my annual that popped up right at that time, I was one of the first ones to get kicked out. And I rode from the top of the state, from Crescent City, all the way down to Calipatria State Prison. And it was like probably about a 5-day drive, and we laid over in Tracy for a few days as well. So it took us about 7 full days to get down to Calipat. When I did, I was interacting with Cassie Cassandra Klein that I put in my story. And when I first arrived there in Calipat, Travis Burhoff, he wasn't even a made man yet. He wasn't even a brother yet. He was just tipped up. He was, he was able to enforce, like the Aryan Brotherhood, he was able to push that agenda, but he wasn't an actual member of the Aryan Brotherhood yet. When I pulled up there, I landed on a yard in Calipatria, and the person that was running that yard was a youngster from Orange County named Sam. Sam didn't have no tattoos, never made any rounds, never put in any work, he did nothing. But he did not use dope, and he was a moneymaker, and Travis used to send about a quarter pound of methamphetamine and a quarter pound of heroin from B-side kitchen, B-yard kitchen, and he'd throw it over to A-yard kitchen. And Travis, like I mentioned before, was really reluctant about who he was going to have hold on to.
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
And since Sam didn't use, Sam made a lot of money, and Travis trusted him, so that's why Sam was in charge. I was on A-yard for about maybe 3 to 4 days, and I was on the yard, on the actual yard, when Sam came and approached me, and he asked me if I knew Little Ronnie Irwin. I said, yeah, bro. I was in the SHU with Little Ronnie. Why? What's up? He said, I just got word from the Hispanics that he has one last hepatitis C treatment dosage, and he was going to be on his way. He said to let Powder know that he's on his way, and if there's any brothers at this prison, to let him know that he has one more treatment and he's on his way. He should be down at this prison within a couple weeks. Me and Ron had never formally met. We've only heard of each other, but it was nothing but good on both sides. He had heard nothing but good about me, and I heard nothing but good about him. I said, cool. Sam offered me to take the yard. And you know what's crazy is I put in my experience how I believe in God and how I believe that everything happens for a reason, and I put out this positive impact, and I share my experiences only for positivity. That's it. And this was a crazy moment in my life because this actually decided a path for me, and this is what happened. So about 2 weeks later, I just only heard that Little Ronnie was going to be down within a couple weeks. I didn't know the exact day. I didn't even know if it was true or not. I just got that message from Sam, and I was anticipating Ronnie showing up at any time, and you never know how it's going to go down. So in the morning, I had GED class. I was pursuing my education, and I was about ready to get my GED in prison. I lived in A section, lower A section in cell 108 at that time, which is on the bottom tier. On the very bottom tier, I stepped outside of my cell. In the MAC rep of my building, I was in 5 block. Little Ronnie was in 4 block. Flip, the MAC rep, came running inside of the block at that time in like some weird panic state, and I was kind of tripping about it. And he was running. He ran over to me, and he said, "Hey, bro, Little Ronnie is outside getting his medication right now, and he said he wants Peni to go out there. He wants to talk to us." The only Peni members that were there at that time was me. And right down the tier from me was my homeboy Ripper from Peni, James Hunt. He used to be from West End Hardcore Skins from Chino. He ended up getting brought in for Slugger from Peni, ended up becoming a member. Ripper did a lot of time in the SHU as well. He was a fool, but he was in bad standings with Peni, and he was in bad standings with Aryan Brotherhood just because of his obnoxious behavior. And he did a lot of things that he wasn't supposed to. Nevertheless, he was there with me, and Little Ronnie said he wanted Peni to come out. He would like to speak to us. So I go grab Ripper, because Ripper's in education with me as well, and we step outside of 5 block, and we're now walking the track of the yard looking for Little Ronnie Irwin. And we look across, and I see a figure that's walking towards us, and I said, there he is right there, bro. I had never seen him before, so I didn't really know, but you can tell these dudes stand out. Just like I stood out on a prison yard, he stood out on a prison yard, and he was walking towards us. And me and Ripper are walking towards him, and he hit.
You have 60 seconds remaining.
All right, Big Jason. Go ahead and do your thing.
As we're walking and we get closer to him, we get maybe 3 to 4 feet away from him, and before we get even in the arm's distance, he takes his right hand and he hits it on his chest, and he says, "Little Ronnie, Aryan Brotherhood." And I stepped closer to him and I said, "It's Powder, Penai." And Ripper told him the same thing. This is Ripper from Penai. And he gave me a hug and he gave Ripper a handshake. And I don't even know if Ripper actually caught that, but I caught it, and I'm not sure what that was. It was kind of deliberate from what I've seen and from what I gathered from it. And Ronnie, you know, when you meet these type of individuals on a yard, you have the stereotype of these dudes that they're just going to be, you know, stone cold. Ronnie was stone cold, but he had like little crusties like all in his face and in his eyeballs. And he just and he apologized for that. He said, "Hey fellas, I want to apologize first and foremost that I'm not my best right now. I just did a fat shot of heroin and I haven't even had time to wash my face. So if I'm a little off, I apologize for that." And we're like, "Oh yeah, no big deal, Ronnie, no big deal, bro. Like, what's going on?" And he said, "Look, we're out of the shoe now, brothers. We're out of the shoe now. We have to be very careful about who we're around because they're not like us." I said, "Who's not like us?" He said, "The rest of the whites. They're not like us, bro. Use honey around here." And what he meant was be kind to other people because, you know, you catch more, what is the phrase, that you catch more bees with honey than you do with vinegar. And he just wanted us to be kind. And he told us, he said, "Listen," he said, "Travis is sending him over a phone and a bunch of dope immediately. As soon as he gets his hands on that phone, he's going to be calling Popeye, who is a good friend of his, which is Donald Mazza, and he's going to talk to him about all these imposters that have been claiming Penai and had been giving the gang a lot of flack," which was true. There had been all kinds of people who were wrongfully claiming Penai up and down the state of California, and it did. It created a lot of flack. It left a really, really bad stain on Penai, and we had to deal with it. Corliss had to deal with it. We all had to deal with it. So it was our responsibility and our obligation to weed these people out. What he wanted us to do is he was going to get with Popeye, talk to him on a cell phone, and he was going to make a list of all the individuals that were not actually Penai, and we were going to target them. We were going to target them that they had to remove their letters or they had to just keep Penai out of their mouth, whatever they decided. But that's what he said. He said, "That's what's up. I'm going to be, and as soon as I'm done talking to Popeye, I'm going to come holler at you guys." He said, "For now, do me a favor and go down a list and put down on a list whatever names you guys can think of that are claiming Penai falsely." And I said, "All right, falsely." And I said, "Okay, fair enough." And we shook hands and we separated. Ronnie was housed in 4 block, which was right next to 5 block. When Cassie came to see me on the weekends, I told her about it. And Cassie was kind of like involved in the mix a little bit. She knew a lot because Cassie used to talk to a lot of people on their cell phones. So when I went out to a visit and sat down with Cassie, she told me that Travis was now, because Travis never used to go out to yard. He would always like stay inside the house. Even when I was there with him, he used to stay inside the cell. He never attended yard now. But now that there's an official brother there, she said that he was out there going to yard now, and he was representing now, and he was doing all these things that he wasn't normally doing before. So that's what was going on. And I told Cassie, I said, "Look, Little Ronnie's on my yard." She said, "I know." She said, "Make sure that you be careful and you don't get yourself involved in anything." When I went back to the yard, Little Ronnie knew that I was getting my visits every weekend, and he wanted me to hook him up with a girl. And I was going to hook him up with a girl. You know, Ronnie told us to do that. He said to get a list of everything together. He said make a long list of whoever you guys can remember that is an imposter of Penai as well. We said okay. And when we separated, after I got back from my visits with Cassie, Little Ronnie wanted me to hook him up with a girl. And you know, Cassie at this time, she was not cool with the Aryan Brotherhood. She didn't want me even being on the main line. More importantly, she didn't want me hanging around them. So, you know, it was one of those things that, you know, she didn't want me hanging around Ronnie Irwin, and he wants me to hook him up, girl, and, you know, he wants me to move in with him. He wants me to move in with him, and when a brother wants you to move in with him, you kind of know what time it is. You know what direction you're going once that happens. So I never even told Cassie about that. If I would have told Cassie that Ronnie wanted me to move in, then she would have been really, really upset, and I already knew that, so I didn't even bother to bring it up to her. And so he tells me, he says, hey, Powder, I want you to move in with me. And I said, well, can I get a couple days to consider this? And he said, what do you mean? You don't want to live with a brother? And he said, Powder, you've been doing this for a long time. He said, come on in with me. Travis is going to be sending me over a cell phone and a bunch of dope, brother. We'll live it up. And I said, you know what? It's good. You know what? Matter of fact, I will move in with you, Ronnie. Matter of fact, this conversation took place on a Monday. They did bed moves on a weekend. So I told Little Ronnie, I said, yes, I will move in with you and I will come over this weekend. And this was on a Monday. So Tuesday, Travis sends him over through the kitchen. He sends him over a phone and a bunch of crystal meth and a bunch of heroin. And basically what happened was Little Ronnie was over there doing his thing, and he was talking to Popeye, and he never got back to me like that. He sent a verbal over to me saying that he wanted me to communicate with him through kites using code words, the code words that we used to use back in the SHU, which were like crazy complex codes. And he wanted to go by the kite name is Kelt. Kelt was his actual kite name. That's what he wanted to use. And I was like, okay, well that's kind of crazy, but all right, that's how we'll do it. So he never got back at us about it. And I'm sitting here wondering what's going on. And it was Friday, the day before I'm supposed to move in with him. And what's crazy is because at this time in my life, I was actually still had aspirations. I had one foot in the game and I had one foot out. I wanted to come home to Cassie. I wanted to change my life secondhand. And on the other hand, I wanted to be somebody. I wanted to be, have power and control. So if I had an opportunity to become a brother or live with one, I was going to take it. Even though I knew that Cassie was going to be bothered by it, I still decided to do this. So it was the day before they did moves, Friday, and it's dinner time. And they usually run chow at 5 o'clock right after they do count at 4 o'clock. And they do it building by building. So 1 block will go, and then 2 block, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5. Well, usually we go the same time every day. It's a repetitive thing in prison, and my door's not opening to go to dinner. And I'm starting to wonder why. And there's a lot of time that's passing. There's a lot of time that's passing, and we didn't hear any alarm, but I'm starting to think that something happened. What is the reason we're not walking to dinner right now? Something's got to be going on. This isn't right, and we're not catching any type of word. And then it hits about 6 o'clock, 6:30, and here comes Sam walking into the building straight over to my door. And he tells me, Powder, he says, I need you right now. And I said, what's going on, bro? He said, they got Little Ronnie Irwin in the cages right now. He just got off on the Southern Mexicans. And I thought he was joking, and my initial reaction was bro, you're kidding me, right? This is an Aryan Brotherhood member. They don't conduct themselves like that. What do you mean? I mean, this has to be something serious if that's really the case. And he tells me again, he said, listen, bro, I'm not playing with you. And he said, a lot of those Southerners that just jumped him were guys that you knew from the SHU, and I'm hoping I can pop you out, and you'll walk me to go talk to these guys so we can iron this out. And I told him, I said, bro, look, I'm not walking outside of this cell. What happened? And Sam ran me down, and I know that this is the exact story. This is the exact truth that happened. And Little Ronnie was slamming big old...
This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
He was slamming big old shots of crystal meth that Travis sent over through the kitchen, and he hadn't done drugs like that in so long, he didn't even realize how much it was hitting. So he was on this phone doing a bunch of crystal meth, and he was losing his mind for several days. He got this drugs and these cell phones on a Tuesday. It's now Friday, and he had been doing shots of crystal meth for the past 3 days. That's why no one had seen him. That's why he wanted me to communicate through kites, because he was starting to lose his mind from the crystal meth and being up for too long. I didn't realize that. I hadn't seen him. All I knew was I was going to be moving in with him on Saturday, which was the next day. And all this is going on. And as Sam's telling me this, I said, so what happened? He said, well, this is what happened. Little Ronnie thought that one of the Southern Mexicans was talking about him in the vent, saying that we're going to get him. Now, here's a little backstory on Little Ronnie. That's something that a lot of people that don't know is that he had an R on his jacket. He had statutory rape from way back, and it was on a Hispanic girl. That's what was going on. So his paranoia was starting to surface, and he thought that these Mexicans were out to get him. It was just a crystal meth talking. Nobody was out to get him. That's not what was going on. This was all in his head. So as time is approaching for the doors to pop open for him to go to dinner, he's thinking that these Southern Mexicans are going to get off on him as soon as the doors open, and he starts panicking, and he grabs a couple bars of soap and he puts them into a sock. And that was what he was using as his weapon. So when the doors popped open, Little Ronnie came out with a soap in a sock, a soap in a sock, and started swinging it at these dudes. As soon as the doors went open, there was a little youngster that was Mexican, and when he went to go dump his trash, that's when Little Ronnie made his move and started hitting him over the head with a sock and a soap. And this is a made man. This is a made man that they're putting hands on. So Little Ronnie is attacking the Southern Mexicans, and they don't even know what to do. And there's about 8 or 9 of them on that tier. There's about 8 or 9 of them in that section, and Little Ronnie's attacking all of them. And about 4 or 5 of them were guys that I knew from the shoe, and they knew that he was a made man, and they knew that he was hands off, but they didn't know what else to do other than jump. So what they did was they punched Ronnie to where he fell. Once he fell, they weren't punching him in the inside of his face. They were just punching him like on the outside of his head, and they were kicking him on the head and everything like that. They did not stomp him out. They did not stomp him out. And when it was done, Little Ronnie wouldn't stop. They were trying to secure the situation, but it wasn't stopping. Little Ronnie wouldn't stop. He really thought that something was going on. And what's crazy is that he had already been thinking of these things. He had already been spinning this for a couple of days prior to this, where he was trying to get white boys, other whites, to back him up, and they were supposed to do it inside the chow hall. That's how it was supposed to originally go down. 2 other whites were supposed to back him up, and when they went inside the dining hall, they were just going to get off on the Mexicans just because, and they committed to that. And one of these whites ended up getting stabbed later on down the line because they didn't jump for this. So what happened was after they secured the scene, finally, after Little Ronnie did that and they jumped him, they finally secured it and they took him to the cages, and they took the Southern Hispanics to the cages, but they released them back to the yard. The only person they had in the holding cages was Little Ronnie. And Sam went to go talk to Little Ronnie, and Little Ronnie was telling him, don't worry about it. There's no war. There's no nothing. This was an isolated incident. I needed to do what I had to do. No one is to get off on these Southern Mexicans, period. He said, but where are those 2 whites that were supposed to jump with me? And it was some dude named Jeremy and a dude named Dylan from TCF. Matter of fact, no, he wasn't from TCF. He was from San Diego Skinheads. And those 2 were supposed to jump with him, supposedly. And it ended up being true, though, because Jeremy ended up getting stabbed when he hit Big Ronnie's yard later on down the line. So basically, Sam tells me, he says, listen, Powder, he says, so that's what happened. Little Ronnie got off on these Southerners, and I need your help to come fix this situation. And I told him, absolutely not. And I didn't know at this time, like, what was I going to do? I started receiving kites from these Southern Hispanics that got off on Little Ronnie, and they were apologizing. They said, listen, Powder, I know that he was a made man. I know that he was Aryan Brotherhood, and I also know that he was going to be your cellie, and we're just telling you that we apologize for what we did, but he left us no choice. And a lot of people that have been on my tablet, and a lot of people that have been wondering what happened with Little Ronnie, that's the story of how he went out. And, everybody has this perception of just because, you're Aryan Brotherhood or you're Peni or you're Mexican Mafia or you're this or that, doesn't mean you can't go backwards or that they're not capable of doing some things that are extraordinary. Because no one would have ever thought for 1 second that a made man, when it came out of the cell with a soap and a sock, like one of the movies, trying to swing it at these dudes. I mean, it was embarrassing. It was embarrassing for us whites that were there. We had to deal with it. Nothing ever ended up happening after that. There was no aftermath for this situation, but Little Ronnie ended up having to drop out. He got himself in trouble. And I guess supposedly that whatever he had done a long time ago had been just haunting him. So anytime he would get spun out on crystal meth, then his paranoia would surface and he'd do things like that of that nature. I ended up catching up with him later on down the line in the THU, but everybody wanted to know about it. And what crazy is because he was an actual member of the Aryan Brotherhood, and he had an R on his jacket. So if there's such a structured gang and they're this or that, then why would he have an R on his jacket within the Aryan Brotherhood, which means that they were making people and overlooking statutory rape. They were overlooking these type of things because that was what was following Little Ronnie. I don't know the ins and outs of why they made him or anything like that. All I know is that a lot of people have been asking me whatever happened to Little Ronnie. What was the story? Because he was one of the main dudes for at least 10 years from my recollection. And what's crazy is because had he not done that, and I ended up moving inside the cell with him, there's no telling what would have happened with me and him. Like he may not have wigged out like that. He may have ended up bringing me in. That was my shot. That was like my pivoting moment in prison, really, because that would have been the first time I would have lived with a brother personally. He was a legitimate brother. He was the Aryan Brotherhood member that was coming down. He was there on the yard. That was my very first time being on a prison yard with a real Aryan Brotherhood member. And, like I said in my story, I said, everything happens for a reason, and I believe in God, and I believe all these things. And reflecting back on that, that all happened for a reason. And I know 100% if I end up moving in with Little Ronnie, there's no, that I would have probably taken that direction, and I probably would have ended up getting made. I would have been well on my way to getting made, but yet he turned around and did something like that. And Little Ronnie had been running things for so many years. He had been running shoes, and he had been running everything for so many years, and that's what happened to him. So anybody who is curious of whatever happened to Little Ronnie Irwin, that's the story right there. That was in Calapat. That was in 2016, and that's when it happened on a yard. And that's the story. And hopefully, this story gave a little bit of peace of mind to all you guys that have been asking me to share the story. That's a little bit of insight into what happened to Little Ronnie. That's the story, and he's on this side now, and he's down there in Donovan, I believe, now on the S&Y side, living the rest of his term and the rest of his life in prison, and that, behind that decision of coming out of the cell and taking off on the Southern Mexicans with a soap and a sock. There it is there.